Any of you that have not gone to law school, this will be 1 hour of law school, and then you just multiply that by 3 years. And then you'll get a little bit of an idea of what we endure, okay? So I'm just going to give the attorneys a couple minutes here. They're just kind of putting their PowerPoint presentation. It's showing up here low on. So we just want to give audiovisual people the time they need to set up. It's up here. It's good. How about? And then you're going to just turn your computer around. Hang on.
If you want the real law school experience, we'll
You have to turn it on, Jeremy. Oh. There's always an audio-visual situation, isn't there?
Nah. Hello.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that one works. Huh? Thanks for doing this. Yeah, for sure. You good? Yeah. We did it. Do you need to turn it around to use it? Yes. We've got steps for you. Okay, we're going to get started. Everybody, you ready? Buckle up. This is a learning, okay? My name is Gina Washburn. I'm a retired attorney, and I'm your host for tonight, your moderator. So a couple of ground rules here. Please check your phones, right? Check them at the door. Make sure that your phone is turned off, if you would, please, out of courtesy. I just want you to know that there are restrooms through that door right there. This is going to be a 1 hour of legal training. It's a fairly intensive body of work that our attorneys have prepared for you tonight. Questions and answers will be dealt with after their presentation, so no interruptions at this point in time. This particular presentation is going to be live streamed. It'll be on YouTube, and it will be on the St. John's Church website and YouTube, correct? It'll also be recorded, so we want to make it available for posterity because it's a significant body of work. The genesis of this particular training was as a result of a recent visit to local downtown businesses by Homeland Security agents, which raised a number of concerns about businesses being prepared in the event that immigration agents came to your place of work, and how should you and your employees respond, as well as to give you a tutorial on what's called employment verification process. It's generally known as the I-9 form that businesses need to complete for every individual who is going to be employed. So it'll be a two-part piece of information. It's going to cover immigration enforcement and relevant agencies, preparation and response plans for immigration enforcement activities at your place of work, ensuring your workforce is authorized, and your I-9 employment verification and compliance. So it's a bit of a heavy topic. I want to just quickly thank co-sponsors. The co-sponsors for this event are the Northfield Chamber of Commerce and Tourism, the Northfield Rotary Club, and the City of Northfield Human Rights Commission. And so in our audience tonight, we're very grateful to have Mayor Zweifel and our City Administrator Ben Marteg, and we also have our Chief of Police, Jeff Schropfer. The chief said that he would be available afterwards or even during maybe a Q&A period if you have a specific question related to Northfield Police and their relationship with immigration agents, which there's a great deal of activity. So those are our co-sponsors. In addition to St. John's, we want to thank them for giving us this space. And David Zdenek, our gentleman, wave your hand, David. David is our audio-visual volunteer, so thank you, David. Yes, I know, we love David. And I'm going to very quickly introduce St. John's pastor, Pam Finkenshire. I'm so close, Finkenshire, who wants to just say something briefly to you, and then I'll introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Gina. It's heartening to see so many community leaders together in this moment. When Gina asked about our providing space for this event several weeks ago, who knew that how timely it would be? I just want to make available to you our sanctuary tonight as well. We have opened that up to the larger faith community. I think a couple of my other clergy colleagues will be around this evening. So whether or not you're a person of prayer, if you're just a light a candle kind of person, and if after tonight's presentation you just want a moment or two to sort of gather yourself spiritually and emotionally, you're welcome to join us just across the commons there. There will be candles. There are some written words if you're a person of Christian faith to use for your own meditation if you like, and also some words that our bishop from the Southeast Minnesota Synod said today at a gathering of over 200 clergy up in Minneapolis at 34th and Portland. It's a heavy day for our state, and I know that many of us bring that with us into this very practical and very practical sort of knowledge that we need tonight. We also want to make sure that you have some spiritual resources if you would like to take advantage of those. So thanks for being here tonight, and thank you for all that you do for Northfield.
We do have some handouts, and I think just not to be too disruptive, I think what we'll do is we'll probably put them, if that's okay with you, put them on a table. There will be a test afterwards, so, take notes. No, not kidding. Anyway, so we'll have some handouts for you. And as I said, this is recorded, so if you feel a bit overwhelmed by the volume of information, we'll get links out to people through the chamber and the Rotary and so forth, so that you can study the materials at your leisure. I've also been asked to mention the fact that Northfield has a group of individuals that are trained and that respond to information of ICE agents in our town. The organization that I'm a part of is called Northfield Supporting Neighbors, NSN. We have a legal fund that is fiscally managed by the Community Action Center. We've been in existence since 2017 during the previous administration of 45 and under this current administration. And so we are available 24/7 by notifications from the populace that they see, if they feel that they see ICE agents in our town. They have been here all week, and so we've been extremely busy. Our responsibility is to respond to a call from a citizen. We go to the location that they've identified what they think is an agent. We determine with certainty from our training that indeed it is immigration. We photograph them, and then we send out, we've got over 1,000 people right now that are receiving alerts. And so we send out an alert as to what we're seeing, a picture if we can, and then to help our citizens know to shelter in place and or to avoid that particular location. So that's work that we're doing, and we have information about that if you would like to register to receive those alerts, or if you would like to register to alert us. So we have that kind of system set up for you. I want to introduce our speakers. We're very pleased that the law firm of Frederickson and Byron that does a tremendous amount of work in our state with regard to legal education. I've been a recipient of their legal education for several decades. And so I'm very pleased that Loan and Jeremy agreed to come here tonight from Minneapolis to talk to us. Loan chairs Frederickson and Byron's immigration group and also leads its I-9 audit and corporate immigration compliance and its H-2B temporary workers practice areas. With her tonight is Jeremy. Jeremy is an associate at the firm who is experienced in assisting companies with worksite enforcement and I-9 inspections. So let's welcome them and learn.
Thank you so much, Gina, for inviting us, and also to the pastor for providing this space to us where I hope that we can share some information with you. This is a heavy time for our state and our communities. I don't want to start this presentation without acknowledging that whether it's your friend, family, colleagues, all of us, I think, have individuals who are being affected right now by the activities taking place in the state. And the killing, murder, death of Ms. Good yesterday has made it very difficult for those who do this work day to day, whether you're a volunteer or observer. And what we hope to do, Jeremy and I hope to do today for you, is to really provide you with information that will help you navigate this time, whether you're an individual, employer, employee, or a business owner. So we have a lot of information to go through with you today, so I'm going to go ahead and start, and we welcome questions too at the end of our presentation. I think that what we have found is when we do these presentations, we can talk about things, but when it really happens in the real world, you are placed in a difficult situation, and I think it would be helpful to have questions that you are actually, that you have based on what you're experiencing, what you're hearing from individuals within the community. So we want to get to that too. For our presentation, though, we are going to be addressing these topics. We are going to first talk about immigration enforcement and the relevant agencies that enforce immigration laws within our country and our state, and also current developments. We're going to talk about how businesses can prepare for enforcement activities. What are the types of activities that you may see, because they may appear in various scenarios and situations. What actually happens in an enforcement investigation, whether it's to appear at your place of employment looking for an individual that they believe is working for you, or have been at your place of business, or as a result of a I-9 investigation. There could be many different scenarios, and we'll go over those scenarios. Then we're going to talk about the Form I-9, which is the employment verification form, which all employers are required to complete for new hires that are hired after November 6, 1986. Can everyone hear me? I want to make sure. Great. So we'll go over the I-9 process, and really we hope to just be with you and answer any questions that you may have at the end of the program. So relevant agencies that you may see, you have heard of the Department of Homeland Security. As you know, the Department of Homeland Security was created after 9/11. It didn't exist until after 9/11. And under the Department of Homeland Security, you have Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That entity has other sub-entities underneath it. That includes enforcement and removal operations, Homeland Security investigations. So think of ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, as being the agency that is responsible for enforcing immigration law in the interior part of the U.S. That is what it's meant to be. You then have Citizenship and Immigration Services. We usually refer to it as USCIS. That is the agency that's responsible for providing benefits, immigration benefits to individuals who are in the U.S. or outside of the U.S. Then you have Customs and Border Protection, which is the entity that is responsible for the port of entries, the borders, for enforcing immigration law at the port of entry or at the border, and also providing benefits when people are at the port of entry and border. So you have these various entities, and what we're seeing now is that all of these entities are coming together and involved in enforcement. As I mentioned to you, it was really only ICE that's responsible for enforcement in the interior of the U.S. and CBP along the border and border security. But under this current administration, now you have these three entities all really working, focusing on enforcement and removal. That is just the reality of what we are in right now. And that's not what we're used to. We're not used to it, especially in Minnesota. If you're in the border states, you may have different experiences with CBP and ICE, but in Minnesota, that's what we've been used to. So ICE here, you have enforcement and DHS tasked with enforcing immigration laws, detention and removal. That is all under ICE. If there's a workplace raid, that is also conducted under ICE. It's usually under the Homeland Security Investigation subset of ICE. They are not calling it HSI anymore. It's really all just referred to as ICE right now. But this entity under ICE is responsible for I-9 inspections, any kind of investigations. In prior administration, they were focused on human smuggling, drug activities, enforcing laws regarding drug trafficking. Right now, it's focused on immigration enforcement. USCIS, as I mentioned, is responsible for administering the immigration law. So any kind of benefits where someone is trying to apply for an individual to work in the U.S. or to come into the U.S., the applications are filed with USCIS, sorry.
Lots of acronyms.
Yeah. So under USCIS, you also have the Fraud Detection and National Security section. This was created, it's recent, it was after 9/11, and the purpose of this entity is to make sure that all of the benefits that employers or individuals apply for, mainly employers, are actually true benefits. So they are responsible for going to employers, places of employment where someone has filed a H-1B petition or some type of immigration petition to hire a foreign national, and making sure that those foreign nationals are employed there consistently with the information that has been presented to the Immigration Service. So that's called FD&S. And as I mentioned before, all of these entities have really moved into enforcement. So USCIS now, even though it's supposed to be an entity that provides benefits for immigration purposes, is now involved with enforcement. All right. So recent immigration enforcement, Jeremy is going to talk about that, but as we all know, it really became a tragedy yesterday in regards to the killing of Miss Good. And what Jeremy's going to share with you is that these stories of immigration enforcement within our communities, we may not be exposed to it, but they're happening in various ways. So Jeremy, you want to share with us about those recent developments?
Yeah, well, thank you, An, and thank you all for being here tonight. I know it's a scary time here in our state, but coming together as a community is so important during these times to show solidarity and to get knowledgeable on some difficult issues. I just appreciate your presence and the dedication of the city of Northfield to doing that. Before we go into developments, one thing on the agencies I think is important to remember is that these are all federal agencies acting under the direction of the executive branch. So you might have local law enforcement or state agencies assisting or not assisting with these types of investigations. The agencies that we mentioned, USCIS, ICE, HSI, FDNS, those are all federal agencies. And one of the most recent developments that we've seen is with the uptick of enforcement activities, there's been a lot more federal agents here in the state of Minnesota. It was reported this week that there was 2,000 officers who kind of surged in here, and they're supposed to be here for a month. Of those 2,000, 1,600 are from ICE and about 400 or so from HSI. So just so if you get an idea of where the focus is, those numbers kind of help you figure that out a little bit. In terms of recent developments, a lot of this goes back to around a year ago when the new administration took over. There were some changes with first day executive actions and executive orders. So one of those was, it was titled Protecting the American People Against Invasion. And what that did was it expanded the federal government's authority to engage in what's called expedited removal. Expedited removal is the authority that CBP ICE has to remove individuals who cannot establish authorization to be in the country without going before an immigration judge. So previously, expedited removal was limited to within 100 miles of the border and within a certain time period of arrival. What this executive action did was expanded that to the interior of the country and without time limits. So that was one of the biggest shifts that we saw, and that was a big signal as to what we should expect next to happen in the country. And obviously, like we've seen the National Guard, CBP, ICE being deployed all over, and here in Minnesota specifically. One other note is that with ICE and being difficult to detect, Gina is a great resource to identify if these are legitimately ICE agents or not in your community. There has been an increase in ICE impersonations, unfortunately. So there's been cases in Pennsylvania, that's where I'm from, at Temple University, but there's also been here in the state of Minnesota as well, a few known cases. And I know that hits close to home just with the recent surge in ICE operations. In full transparency, this slide deck was created a week ago, and we couldn't have foreseen what was going to happen this past week. But what we did know was that there was a surge in September as well. It was called Operation Twin Shield. Secretary of DHS, Kristi Noem, came and gave a big report about it. It was highly publicized. They said they reviewed over 1,000 cases for widespread fraud here in the city. If you look at the numbers, she says 1,000, there was 4 arrests and 42 cases referred to ICE. And this was over the course of 2 weeks of intensive, highly publicized media activity. There was also a big focus on the Somali population in the Twin Cities, and then, as we know, the activities of this last week. These enforcement trends are a continuation from the first Trump administration. I-9 audits are a method that HSI uses to gather information about employees and workforces. We saw there was about 10 times as many I-9 audits during the first Trump administration as there were during the Biden administration, and that the goals were shifted to about 12 to 15,000 audits. COVID happened and kind of interrupted that goal, but what we have seen is that I-9 audits are on the rise again, especially this past month. Juan and I have been on the phone pretty much nonstop when it comes to I-9 audits and HSI activity in the Twin Cities and in Minnesota generally, and we expect that to continue. So what Juan is going to talk about now is, with all of these developments, what can you do practically to prepare? How can you prepare your workplace? What does investigation look like? We've talked about all these agencies, but what can they actually do? By show of hands, how many of people in the room are business owners? I know that was a big focus of the training tonight, given the recent activity. So a good number, and then interested community members as well. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy. So before I start focusing on workplace enforcement activities and the types that we will see, I want to go back to what Jeremy shared with you, which was the expansion of expedited removal, because I think this impacts everyone, all individuals, which is what we are recommending is that because of what ICE is doing, for example, we received reports this morning from one of our colleagues that you had ICE officers at the Hmong village in St. Paul, which is like an open market, walking around asking individuals what their immigration status is. And we are going to see more of that. We have 2,000 individuals here. They need to do something as part of their job, and previously many of them actually are not even from the Twin Cities. So we are recommending that you should carry documentation of what your immigration status is, even if you're a US citizen. Carry a copy of your passport, not originals, but copies, because you don't want to lose your originals and you don't want them to take it away if they stop you for some reason. The biographical page, a passport card, anything to show that you are here lawfully. If you are not here lawfully, let's say you are here without proper documentation, carry documentation to show that you have lived continuously in the U.S. for at least 2 years. Because under the law, if you can document that you've lived here continuously for 2 years, they have to provide you an opportunity to appear before an immigration judge or put you in deportation removal proceedings. If you cannot document it, as Jeremy stated, they have expanded the definition of expedited removal. And if you cannot establish that you've been living here continuously, whether it's undocumented, that's fine, continuously for 2 years, they can just remove you without any hearing or opportunity before an immigration court. This is really important because this is what's happening here. It's always happened and common along the border states. They've experienced this, those individuals who have lived without proper documents along the border state, but now it's here too, in Minnesota and other parts of the U.S. So that's one way you can protect yourself as an individual, and it could be anyone. I know we may have some questions, but I'm going to go forward with talking about how workplaces can prepare for immigration enforcement. So this is a diagram, and we're going to have a lot of dense information here, and I'm not going to address everything, but we want you to have this information. And so if you can get a copy of this presentation, you'll be able to read that information in more details. But this chart here kind of goes over the steps of a government agent worksite visit. Okay, so when they come to your place of employment, what you want to be able to do is to be prepared and have a policy in place that outlines exactly what should happen. And that includes asking them for a copy of their business card and asking them to identify themselves. For businesses that don't want them to enter their business, you can definitely establish a sign that states that law enforcement, ICE is not able to enter, and there are certain actions that they have to take in order to access your private property. There is no requirement that you have to open the doors if it's a private property to an ICE officer. Now you have to make a judgment as to what your safety entails here. And we're not going to say that you shouldn't open the door if, they're threatening someone that you may love outside the door with a gun or something. We don't know what the circumstances are, but we can just advise you on what the law states, which is you're not required to open the door to an ICE officer unless they have a judicial warrant. And judicial warrant is a very specific document that is signed by a judge, a magistrate. A general subpoena from Immigration Customs Enforcement is not a judicial warrant, and you are not required to open the door when ICE is there and wants to come in to meet with you or speak with you. All right, let me see here. Let me show, I kind of jumped. All right, so I talked about the subpoena, I talked about the warrant in terms of what is required. You will see warrants that ICE presents. They call it warrants or subpoena, but they're administrative warrants or subpoena that's issued by the agency. And that is different from a judicial warrant or subpoena. Okay? And so this kind of outlines what you can do in each of the scenarios that I just shared with you. The judicial warrant looks like this. As you can see here, my eyesight's not really good, but if you read it, you can see there's a signature by a judge, and it's very different from a immigration-related administrative warrant, which is just signed by ICE. So you have the right to ask for a copy of it. You have the right to stop and read it before you make any decision. You have the right to say that you cannot open your door, even if they're knocking on it, and unless there's a judicial warrant, and they can leave it there and you can review it. Okay. This is a chart summarizing various enforcement documents. I talked about the administrative warrant, usually signed by ICE, issued by ICE. It can be to arrest individuals, get records, but again, not enforceable in terms of a judicial warrant or one that's signed by a judge. They can enforce it, but again, it's not legally required for you to allow them to come in for that warrant. There's also the deportation order. As an employer or a business or individual, ICE can come and say they have an outstanding deportation order for an individual. Again, just because they have a deportation order does not mean that you have to give them access to the individual. You have the right to ask for counsel. You have the right to state that, you as a business will not become involved in the removal process. There is nothing that requires you to be part of it and comply with what they're asking you to do. We talked about the administrative subpoena, which is a request for documents, also judicial subpoena, which is a request for documents too. And I talked about how one is, the administrative subpoena is not signed by a judge, and the administrative, that's the administrative, and the judicial one is signed by a judge. If it's signed by a judge, you need to comply with it. But you have the right to ask for counsel and time to review it too. In real life situations, we all panic, and what we hope to do is just kind of give you that information, and perhaps you can share that information with individuals to know that despite what you hear and what's going on, you do have rights. A scenario that we see a lot is ICE contacting employers for employee information. And so ICE will come with a signed subpoena or warrant for requested information. I've mentioned before, unless it's a judicial warrant, you don't have to comply with it. You can buy time and ask for them to provide it to you, and that you will seek counsel on it to see what you need to do to provide that information. Be aware of privacy laws and industry-specific privacy laws such as FERPA, HIPAA. Those are privacy and data laws that you need to be aware of. My recommendation is just tell them you need to talk to legal counsel before you can take any action. That's your policy. ICE may appear, this is one of the hardest scenarios, is when ICE appears at your work site to execute an administrative removal order. Let's say they say, hey, we know that you're employing this individual and we need to execute this removal order. You as an employer can say, our policy is not to participate in execution of removal orders. Please contact my legal counsel to discuss any questions you may have. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. Okay? You may, there are situations we get asked a lot, well, can I tell the individual who is the subject of the order if ICE leaves? There's nothing that states that you cannot tell that individual. Now there's concern about, well, are you engaging in harboring or smuggling if you tell this individual that ICE has come and you know that they're there? There's nothing that states that you have to, again, not reveal that ICE has come and asked for this individual's information and has issued a warrant for this individual. I would be really careful though. And we have heard scenarios where employers have had people hide. I would not engage in those activities. Once you let ICE in, they are in. And that's why it's important not to let them in. And you can do it in a cooperative way. You can establish a policy that says, look, our company's policy is not to allow law enforcement in private areas. Can we wait till the end for questions? We would be happy to answer the questions, but we just have a lot of information. And once we get a question, we're going to go off to another question. So definitely, there's nothing, like I said, that prevents you from informing your employee or the individual of this information. All right, Jeremy is now going to talk about preparing for worksite enforcement, how to establish a enforcement action plan. We have been talking about this for about a year. We knew this was going to happen. You know, the last time I was here in Northfield, I think was in the first Trump administration, presenting at a very similar event like this, and I think it was at St. Olaf. And so when Gina called us, I was really happy to say, yeah, I'll be happy to come back to Northfield because this is deja vu here. But really, what you want to do is prepare for these worksite enforcement actions. We know it's coming. This administration has stated we are going to enforce immigration law. We don't want immigration here. So what do? Establish a policy to inform everyone at your place of employment or at your organization as what needs to be done if ICE or other law enforcement entities come. It's not any different from when the FBI comes or the Department of Labor comes. They're very consistent practices that you want to engage in, and Jeremy is going to outline a plan that you can follow.
Thanks, An. So now that we know the types of enforcement activities, the mechanisms that ICE uses, let's talk about how to prepare actually practically. Let's give some practical tools out, because the best time to prepare is before. If you don't have a plan in place when somebody comes knocking to your door, when somebody visits your business, that's when it gets really confusing, it gets really fast, it's scary, and you can make a snap judgment that might not be what's in the best interest of you as a business or your employees. So it's important to have a plan in place, and one of the best things that you can do is centralize. To have an appointed representative, somebody who, and now that you've all been to this presentation, you're all going to get these notes, you're all going to get these handouts, somebody who knows what to do. Have somebody in mind, make sure that phone number is in a place that's easy to access. We've had large organizations put together call trees. So if this person's not available, call this person. If that person's not available, call this person. And then in those call trees, it's important to have legal counsel, somebody who's an expert on that list as well, somebody who you can contact. It doesn't have to be us, it can be us, but there's a lot of options that you have. It's just important that you know somebody that you can contact. Otherwise, if you're making a cold contact, you risk not having capacity, not having availability, not knowing your business or the specifics of what you do. So establishing that relationship now, if you think you're at risk, is really important. And then train with your frontline employees and your managers. While it's great that you have the head knowledge, who is the first person they're going to see? It's going to be that person at the register. It's going to be that receptionist. It's going to be the person who's that first point of contact. And a little bit later, we'll have some first contact scripts. That's another popular way to prepare, is to have little note cards that could have a line of saying, I know to look out for an administrative versus a judicial warrant. So having just a couple of sentences prepared that somebody who in the moment can read off of a script and have a way of asking for that information clearly and succinctly, that can be really important. But having trainings, whether it be Know Your Rights or exactly what we're doing tonight, and we'll give you the materials to do that for your employees. Another really important thing that you should consider is what areas of your business are public and what areas are private. We talked a lot about warrants and why they're important. We talked about judicial versus administrative, what they can enter. The key is, though, public areas are public areas. Anybody can go into them. So for example, if we think of a doctor's office, that's a really good one. The reception area, the waiting area, semi-public. You would likely need to have some sort of reason to be there, but anybody could walk into that for a very temporary period of that waiting room. If you wanted to go to the examination rooms, then that's private. You have to have a reason. You have to be invited by the doctor, by the nursing staff to go into those areas. So when you think about public versus private, think about If anybody from the community came into your space, where would they be allowed to go? Where would they need extra permission to go? And if you have concerns about officers being in areas, this is where we can take some practical steps to designate areas as public and private and make it really clear. Because you need a judicial warrant to enter those private areas. In those judicial warrants too, they need to specify what they're looking for and the scope of the private area that's to be searched. There has to be some sort of reason to do so. So this slide gives you some examples of what you can do. Posting signs to make clear what's public and private. It's that simple. You've seen those beware of dog private signs on people's yards. You can put a similar sign with your own wording that designates maybe if you own a restaurant, that the kitchen area is private. You wouldn't have anybody from the public go back there. They could pose a health or safety concern. Same thing with law enforcement and with federal officers here. Physical barriers are also really helpful. So if you have an event space, for example, those like velvet ropes to designate public or private areas, those can be helpful. Or if you're looking to do a renovation of your space, maybe consider reducing your public and private areas, and then keeping private information out of public view. That should go without saying, but employee documents, sensitive business information, keeping those in private areas so they're not easily visible from a public standpoint. If somebody can just walk into your business and see some of this sensitive information from a public area, that's something that we should consider, because if it's publicly available, then it's publicly accessible and it's easy to act on from an enforcement standpoint. So public and private areas, knowing or considering that for your business is important. And then also knowing your rights as an employer. That's the purpose of today's training. We've talked about posting signages with your hours and operations. If you're not open, you're not public. So that's easy. You have the right to inform an officer that you can't speak on the company's behalf. So that's something that you could train your front desk or your first point of contact staff on, is that I don't have the authority to do this. I don't have the authority to speak on behalf of the agency, but I'm happy to hold you until I can get that person who can get you that right information. Confirming the nature of the visit, the agency, the officer, escorting the officer into a private space. That's another important one. If you have a conference area or a conference room or somewhere that they can go that it's not going to cause a disruption. You're concerned about not just your employees, but the public and the reputation of your business. If you can escort to a private area that you feel comfortable, say like a conference room or an office, somewhere that's easy to, for example, facilitate an interview or facilitate a conversation, it might be worth having that place designated in case a visit comes. And then again, asking for a judicial or administrative warrant and declining to speak with an investigator without legal counsel present. A little bit more, you do have employees, if they are asked to be interviewed, can request an immigration attorney or an attorney be present for those interviews, and you have the right to inform your employees that they have that right as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about some special issues about harboring and what's allowed and not allowed, but you should not tell employees not to speak with investigators. At that point, it's their decision, not yours as an employer. Everybody has their own agency, and some people might be willing to put up more of a fight when it comes to a conversation, or some people might be willing to turn over documents immediately. That's their choice. So it's a choice you need to let them make and not make for them. And I'll save this last point because I have a slide about it, but what Lon was saying earlier, not telling employees to hide or leave the premises. And we'll explain a little bit why. Finally here, you have the right to ask for documents and to document. That's honestly, if you don't have any plan, documentation is key. Writing down that agent's name, the badge number, what agency they're with. You might not have the ability to deal with it in the moment, but you might have the ability to follow up with it after the fact once you have more information. So documenting the nature of the conversations, what they're asking for, if you can get an idea of the scope of what they're looking for, those documents are going to be key in follow-up. And you shouldn't attempt to destroy or hide documents or evidence in the moment either. At that point, a visit's already started. There's very little you can do about it. The best course of action is to deal with it after the fact. So we talked a little bit about first point of contact scripts. I have some examples here. We can reference them whenever you get these materials. But the key is identifying who the agency that's visiting you, asking to see their credentials, asking to wait for further action until legal counsel is present, and identifying the purpose of the visit. There's also some points here about asking whether they have a judicial or administrative warrant, and just getting that to examine. So I have all sorts of scenarios: officers entering your business to search generally, officers requesting to speak to a specific guest or an employee, officers actually presenting you a warrant, what can you do? And then officers serving an I-9 notice of inspection. A notice of inspection is the formal administrative document that says you need to produce your company's I-9s within 3 business days. They're usually accompanied by a subpoena that requests all sorts of documents about your company, like your quarterly tax returns or your payroll information. So this first point of contact is just to accept that document and to say that you're going to comply with it at a later time. Because at the moment, once it's served, it's served. You have to go ahead and go through with that action later. So this just kind of helps mitigate that information in the meantime. So I know I've mentioned it a few times, and Juan's mentioned it as well. Harboring is one of the concerns for businesses specifically. And what harboring means is affirmative actions intended to prevent the person from being found. And there is an intent requirement. The standard is knowing or in reckless disregard to the person's status. So either you know that they're going to have a problem, or you're recklessly disregarding information that's been told to you that they're going to have a problem. That's, if you know that somebody might have an issue, if enforcement is immediately present, and you take actions to conceal, harbor, or shield individuals. Those are the 3 actions that are enumerated in the statute, and there's all sorts of case law, and it's a very squishy area. So one thing I would say about harboring is that this is very broad information. You're going to need specific advice specific to your situation and to your business if you are concerned about harboring. What we do know is that in the past, courts have said that harboring means giving help to undocumented persons, like providing shelter, money, or employment. Those are 3 pretty established areas. Other courts have said that providing housing or helping people stay in the country and prevent authorities from finding them also constitutes harboring. So these are federal offenses. These are offenses punishable by federal prison time and jail. And shield from detection is always one that gets some questions. What does shielding from detection mean? That's a very broad term, and if you have a career in the law, you'll learn that the law is very broad in general. Shield from detection has been interpreted to be more than just concealing or physically hiding some money. It can involve, like we said, giving housing or making false statements or falsifying documents. Even falsifying employment could be shielding from detection. So that's harboring. And then one other special concern before I pass off to Lon is what does it take to actually stop somebody? What is the standard that a federal officer needs to engage in a stop, to ask for documentations? What legal authority do they have to do that? And the key word here is reasonable suspicion. We're seeing all across the state these roving patrols. Like Lon said, there's 2,000 officers. They need something to do. They're going to stop people. So when can they stop people? When they have a reasonable suspicion that they have committed an immigration violation or a federal crime. That's the standard. Reasonable suspicion has been around for a really long time, and there was a 1975 Supreme Court case that said that an individual's apparent race or ethnicity could not be the sole basis for reasonable suspicion for a stop. That was in the context of a vehicle, but that was widely held to apply to any stop. So you couldn't just stop somebody because they looked different, because they were of a different race or ethnicity. That standard has changed with the recent Supreme Court. So there was a new Supreme Court case this past year in 2025 that said that it was in California, and you now can use race. It's a totality of the circumstances analysis. But essentially, totality of the circumstances lets you consider all sorts of things that you weren't able to consider in the past. So this happened in Los Angeles, and they said that it was valid to stop people because there's a high percentage of illegal immigrants in that area, or because that people tend to gather in these places to seek daily work. that they often seek certain types of jobs, and they list labor, landscaping, agriculture, and construction as those jobs. Or that they're from areas like Mexico or Central America and don't speak much English. These are quotes from the case itself. So if you're wondering what totality of the circumstances is, what kind of profiling it allows, these are the types of things that are now permissible under law to make a stop of folks if they have the reasonable suspicion, and that's how it's being interpreted now. So now that we've talked a little bit about businesses, what you can do, the plans, the response plans that you can put in place, and some of these special issues, how can you practically help your employees? Because I think that's what it comes down to for a lot of people here in the room today. What can you do to help your workforce to prepare them for enforcement? And Juan's going to talk a little bit about what you can do on an individual level.
And I already discussed this previously, so it won't take long, but documentation for people in non-immigrant status, for example, students who are here in the U.S. Or H-1B workers, what kind of documentation should they have on them? I also want to share with you that under the current administration, all individuals who have not been inspected or let's say have an I-94 record need to register with the Immigration Service. There is a website that they can go and register in. If you move to a new address and you're here as a non-immigrant, or if you're a lawful permanent resident, you need to update your address with the Immigration Service because that can be a basis in which you can violate the law. This was after 9/11. So make sure that these individuals are following those requirements. So the following documents should be carried. We list this out, but really what you want to do is make sure that they have documentation of their legal status in the U.S. So for example, a F1 student will have an I-20 record along with the I-94 record that shows that they're lawfully here. The I-94 record can be obtained for all individuals online through CBP. It is CBP who holds the I-94 records of individuals who have entered the U.S. If they have an immigration benefit that was filed at USCIS, that I-94 record will not be online with CBP, but they will have a copy of their I-94 record based on the approval notice that was issued to them or to their employer. So their I-94 record, that is what controls the immigration status of an individual in the U.S. It's not about the visa stamp that's in their passport. Copy of their current status documents can vary depending on their status, but like I said, it's the I-94 record. For students, you should also carry an I-20 record along with the I-94 record to show that you're currently enrolled in a program that's on the I-20 form. J1 students, it would be the DS 2019 form. H-1B workers, L1 workers, any non-immigrant workers will have a I-797 approval notice, but really it's their I-94 record, okay, that controls their status. A question that we are seeing a lot is individuals who are in TPS status or parole status. As you know, the current administration terminated many countries from the TPS program, and there's still litigation about it right now, and I would just advise you to look online at USCIS, and if it's not clear, contact legal counsel. It's not clear to us sometimes too, because what's happening is, for example, the temporary protected status of certain countries have been terminated, but there are lawsuits in place, and as a result of judicial orders or court orders, they still may have work authorization. They may be expiring soon. It's very confusing to employers right now, and we understand that. So please make sure you reach out for assistance regarding that, or look at the USCIS website, and it tries to outline it. There we go. Documents for lawful permanent residents and U.S. citizens. There are samples here of just the green card. While U.S. citizens are not required to carry documentation, they can be stopped. And we have seen what's happening here is that there can be racial profiling, or just they're not in a good mood and they're asking everyone for their documentation of being a U.S. citizen. And so you can carry a copy of your passport card, naturalization certificate, maybe birth certificate even. That is something that you can carry to establish your U.S. citizenship status. Again, you're not required under the law to show it, but we are finding that you are being asked for it, and you should be able to do it. Copies, that's all. You don't need originals. Just make copies to have on you, have on your phone, whatever you can easily access. Okay? And I'm not going to go further into that. Some things to consider. We know that individuals are being picked up. Additional personal safeguards that you can establish for individuals who may be in vulnerable situations. Establish emergency contacts. Update that information at your school, daycare center. Trusted contacts that should be given copies of relevant documents. We're advising families, and this is really heartbreaking, is families to establish plans as to the possibility of their parent being picked up, or even a child being picked up. Who should be delegated parental authority if both of the parents are picked up? Who can pick up their children who are in schools or at daycare center? Having those type of documentation before things happen is really helpful to protect their family and their children. So there are examples of those parental authority documents online, but we can also provide them to you. Consider power of attorney documents or guardianship documents. Put those in place and establish a communication plan. I have a team member who just contacted me and said that her cousin has been picked up. He had an outstanding order from years ago, but they were able to keep him here in the U.S. because the U.S. has a policy of allowing individuals to remain in the U.S. even if they have an outstanding order, because they can't remove this individual to the country. There's no agreement with the country. Well, under this administration, they're not following that. Those individuals are now being picked up, and if they have an outstanding order, it is likely that they're going to be removed pursuant to that order that was executed 20 years ago. And they've been reporting every year or every month to ICE to show that they're complying with their release requirements. They're being removed now. So, so where is this individual? Who is this individual going to call? I don't think they were prepared for that, even though they knew it was a possibility. But really, we didn't know it was happening until a couple of months ago. And so make sure that these individuals, who are vulnerable, have these safeguards in place in case they are picked up. We're going to end the presentation with employers and their I-9 obligation. As I mentioned before, the I-9 is required for all employers to fill out to establish the employment eligibility and identity of all new hires. And Jeremy's going to go over with you what the I-9 requirements are. This is an area that there is no doubt about it. ICE is focused on it. We have seen a complete increase in I-9 audits. The reason is that they are using this not only to make sure that employers are in compliance, but to find out information about individuals. I am sure that the I-9s that we're being required to provide are then being put in some kind of database to find individuals who might have outstanding orders or who they have records were not lawfully here. So this is not coincidental. It is definitely part of the law, but an increase on it in addition to the increase in ICE presence is part of the strategy of enforcing immigration law and removing individuals who they believe should not be here in the U.S. I'm going to talk about I-9s.
Yeah, thanks, Alon. And as we mentioned, of those 2,000 officers that came, 400 of them were with HSI, and HSI is the agency that helps with these I-9 audits. So I know that we're covering a lot of information tonight. All these materials will be available after the fact. We're almost here. This is the last topic, and we'll be able to take some time for questions after. But in terms of the I-9 requirements, the I-9, if you've ever held a job, it's that form that you fill out usually on the first day where you have to present your passport, your driver's license, social security card. It's the federal government's way of verifying an employee's ability to work in the United States. There's a couple different steps. There's section 1 of the form, which the employee fills out, that they have to attest to their status, whether they're a non-immigrant, or whether they're a green card holder, whether they're a citizen. And then there's the section 2, which is the presentation of documents aspect. You might recall that there's all sorts of options, any number of combinations of documents that you can request. There's list A documents, list B, list C. You can Google all these after the fact. But what's important from an employer point of view is that you don't need to verify the legitimacy of these documents. They have to be facially valid. So you don't need to be an expert in employment authorization documents. Juan mentioned that TPS and EAD categories are really difficult to keep track of. That's true for us. I have to Google them every single day. So they can't expect employers to stay on top of that either. You just need to determine whether it appears to be a real document. And then once you fill out the forms, there's all sorts of timing requirements. There's retention requirements as well. You need to keep the forms available in the event that you are audited like this. It's for active employees, and then it's for former employees, whether they were terminated within the last year or if their first day was within the last 3 years. So there's a couple of retention requirements, and then what happens in the event that you are served an inspection. How does it go? So the first step is you receive a notice of inspection. And that notice of inspection is a document that demands that you produce your original I-9s and copies of supporting documents. So if employees presented you passports, employment authorization cards, green cards, whatever it might have been, that you present those documents to an HSI auditor within 3 business days. There's a subpoena that goes along with it, and that you should respond to that also within 3 business days or request some sort of extension. And that's the business documents. That's who are you related to as a business? Do you have subsidiaries? Do you have affiliates? Who's your executive director? Things like that. Those are the types of information that get requested in the subpoena. Once you turn those documents in, what happens? They go to HSI, who inspects the validity of those forms. They assess for technical violations. It's a 1-page form now. It looks really easy. It's not. I promise it's not. It's not uncommon to see error rates of over 50%, over 75% in this form. So they'll assess technical violations, but really what we're seeing now is they're more interested in violations of folks who can't establish employment authorization. If some of the documents provided were illegitimate, they'll run all the numbers through certain background checks, and then they might issue a notice of suspect documents where you have to make the decision or give the employee the option of making a decision whether they're going to try and present new documents that establish their employment authorization or if they're going to leave the company because you're no longer eligible to employ them. If there are violations, like I mentioned, they can result in an intent to fine, whether it's for hiring or knowingly hiring or continuing to employ folks who don't have employment authorization, or for those technical violations. And what the range of these fines can be really varies between whether this is your first inspection, your second inspection, and how gross the issues are. There is the option also, if you are compliant and they're relatively minor issues, that this results in a warning notice. And having an immigration attorney on your side through this inspection process is helpful. There's often a relationship with the auditors in the city that they can help navigate you through, that can help mitigate whether you're going to result in a fine or a warning notice at the end of it. This is an example of the subpoena that gets served. Again, probably better for the reference materials after the fact. It lists out the sample documents that they want. It's very boilerplate. Every single inspection that I think we've seen these exact same 12 requests, so we're very familiar with it. So definitely give it a look after the fact. And then how can you prepare? Have somebody really trained in I-9 administration who can help you when you're onboarding employees. The best time to catch these issues is at the beginning, whenever you're filling out that form. That central I-9 administrator can also help you with what's called an internal audit. Companies always have the ability to audit their I-9s. Yes, there are some issues that you can't remedy. Timeliness is the most obvious of them. Forms have to be signed by the employee on or before the first day of employment and by the business within 3 business days. If you didn't have the timely signatures, you can't fix that. But that's one issue on the form. You can fix all the other issues on the form, essentially. So say the documents presented were the wrong combination of B or C documents. You can go back and request that they represent documents and then reinsert those onto the form. The important part is you need to correct the forms correctly. No whiteout. That's a blanket rule. No whiteout. ICE always assumes that you're hiding something if there's whiteout. Red ink pen, strike the form, and then make the correction, date the correction, initial it, and say that it was because of an internal audit. That's why you were doing that. Same thing with omissions. You can insert the omitted information in red ink. You just need to make it really clear that you're making a correction. And because these fine ranges are so variable, the fact that you're trying goes a really long way to show that you're trying to comply with the right policies. So that's some practice tips here. Correctly. I could have worded that better. Or maintain copies of documents. Because if you have copies of documents, for example, say that you got the driver's license number wrong whenever you wrote it down. If you have a copy of that document and it's obvious that this was the driver's license, you can make that correction right there and you can avoid the fine that would have resulted because you have a copy of that document. Okay, I promise this is the last slide. Responding to an I-9 inspection, having that central point of contact who can get you on the right path, whether it's contacting an immigration attorney, whether it's having these documents collected already since you've seen the boilerplate language, you know what's going to be requested, having somebody who can deal with that. Employers have 3 business days, so it's going to be a fast turnaround. And making copies of all communication documents during that time is going to be important because you want to show that you're making an effort to comply with these requests. A lot of the times, warning notices, they result in the fact that the companies were very compliant and very responsive.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We would love to answer any questions. And Gina, I don't know if you wanted to have it in a format or anything. We really appreciate you coming out here and wanting to obtain this information. It's so important now. This is just the beginning, you all, and that's what's so frightening, is that we're 1 year in. This is the beginning of an increase that we're going to be experiencing for the next remaining 3 years, and we'll see what happens after that. But we're in this for the long haul, and we want to make sure that you have the information you need to protect yourself. And we'd love to entertain any questions.
Sure. I don't know what works best for our audiovisual gentlemen, if you would prefer to have individuals stand with a microphone and ask a question, or you want them to write it on a card and hand it to
Can
me.
we stand up too? Is it going to mess up your recording if we stand up? No. Okay. Plus, I'm short, so I'm just.
So has anybody written a question down on a card that I can pick up? Or does anybody have a question? Please stand.
I know there was a lady here that had a question when I was presenting. Okay, great.
Which one?
No, anyone. Here's one right here.
Oh, okay. Please stand.
You had a slide in there about keeping documents for I-9 verification. And I've heard different things about that, whether you should keep them or not, from different HR or legal professionals. So could you speak to that a little bit, the pros and cons? And then also, if I could have 2 questions. considering a farm,
Yeah.
would a gate serve as a barrier with a sign that would be good enough for, because there's a lot of spaces that should be private on a farm, but are very easily accessed by anyone.
So to your second question regarding a farm situation, would a gate be sufficient? It depends on what the rest of the farm is. We actually have been working a lot with our real estate department, who have been getting questions about this from a lot of their landlord tenants, situation. And if you have a farm that is, let's say, gated, or you have barriers, fencing around it, and it states very clearly private property along the barriers, intermittently, that indicates that it's private property. And there are certain signage that has really clear instructions to ICE and other law enforcement agencies that they will be trespassing if they go beyond this point. So I really recommend that you look at some of those signage and post them around the farm area. But usually a gate indicates that it's private property, and if you note it, that's what it means. And they need to, the more information you can give them to explain that, hey, this is private property, you need to contact this person if you have any questions or need to contact any individuals here, I think is really helpful. To your first question, I think it was about documentation, HR legal documentation as part of the I-9 retention process. Oh, yeah, I love this question because I've been doing this for 30 years, and I have been one of those practitioners that have stated that you should keep photocopies of supporting documents. And let me share with you why I state that. Unless you know that you have a vulnerable workforce, and there's a reason why you shouldn't be keeping those documents. Keeping those documents have prevented many employers from being fined, because under the I-9 process, if you keep copies of supporting documents and there are mistakes in your I-9s, and there are always mistakes in the I-9s, you can still make corrections. They're called technical violations. And under the law, during an I-9 inspection or audit, an employer has 10 business days to make corrections to technical violations. And if you are able to make the corrections to those technical violations, you can avoid a lot of fines. And it's been my experience that when my employers' clients have documentation of their I-9s, they've been able to avoid a lot of fines. That's also showing good faith, that you're trying to do the best you can. The reason that other attorneys have stated that you shouldn't keep copies of supporting documents is because they say you don't want proof that an individual has provided fraudulent documents to you. But as Jeremy stated, you're not expected to be a forensic expert here. The law states that you have to comply in good faith with the I-9 requirements, and that's what it requires. They have to establish other requirements to show that you had constructive knowledge of unauthorized employment or actual knowledge of unauthorized employment, and you didn't follow those. So that's a long response, but why I say that it is in an employer's best interest to keep copies of supporting documents.
And can I add a couple points there? I was the HR professional that taught employers about the I-9 process for a period of a decade, and so and I would audit employers' records on their behalf. And so let me just give you a couple additional pointers, if this is okay. You can correct me. I'll stand for correction. But fundamentally, what I would advise employers, that if you do take photographs of the legal documents at any point in time for one person, you have to take photographs of legal documents for every person, because it would be considered discriminatory.
Right.
That for some individuals that you would hypothetically suspect, you would take a photograph of their document, but for others, you would not. So if you start with photographs, you always photograph. That's number one. Number two, The documents, the I-9 form, which has to be completed in a timely manner. It's 3 business days from the date of the individual's employment. So you have to have a timely recording of your visual inspection of those documents and retention of those documents. You need to have all of your I-9, in my personal opinion. I'm a retired attorney, so this is not legal advice, okay? You need to have your I-9 documents in their own 3-ring notebook, not in personnel files. Because when ICE comes to inspect, or Department of Labor or anyone comes to inspect your I-9 documentation, they do not get access to your employees' personnel files. That's an entirely other private set of documents. So it's a 3-ring notebook with tabs for the current employees, for any corrected I-9 forms, and for retention of employees that are now not with you. So if you go onto the web, you can learn everything you ever want to know about how to do I-9 compliance properly. So if an ICE agent or Department of Labor comes to your place of business, you give them a 3-ring notebook in a room where they can be private about it. All of your I-9 documents need to be under lock and key. You cannot have those accessible generally, in my personal opinion, right? They are HR documents. So those are some of my suggestions.
Yeah, no, correct. If you require, if you're making copies, it needs to be consistent. It's a policy that is applied across the board. You can definitely change your policy where now you may say you haven't been doing it, but effective January 10th, you will start making photocopies of supporting documents and note it in your I-9 records. I-9 records can be maintained in physical form or electronic form, and definitely do not give them any documents. You have 3 business days to make sure that everything that you are providing them is what they've requested and in order. So you never want to hand anything to them, and keep it separate, as Gina mentioned, from documents.
Do you have a microphone? Oh, Charlie? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to change subject on you just a tiny bit. I'm not an employer, but my question really revolves around having an undocumented person in your car with you. I volunteer to teach young people, a lot of international college students and Latino young people, how to drive. I'm not a driver's instructor. They take their driver's training. They need a little bit more experience, and then I take them in for the test. What happens if I get stopped with a young undocumented person in the car? By the way, they all have drive permits. They'll all have some ID with them. But what do? Do I lock up the car? Do I run? Do I give them up? Do I shoot the guy? Tell me what to do, because all those options are on my mind.
No, it's a great question, and I think it's a good example, too, because it speaks to what the harboring standard is. The intent requirement is knowing or reckless disregard of the person's status, but the important thing to remember is that it requires affirmative action to conceal, to hide, or to shield from detection. So I think your question really goes to if you are stopped in whatever event, one, you need to ask, do you know, or are you recklessly disregarding this person's status? As somebody who probably teaches lots of different students, you probably have no reason to know or recklessly disregard somebody's immigration status. So you're probably covered there. But when it comes to if they're asking for this person, you have to determine whether your action is going to be to shield, hide, or protect.
I think it's really clear now that if something like that happens, you're going to cooperate, meaning you need to protect your livelihood. You need to protect yourself. You need to protect that individual. We are not dealing with individuals who really want to engage in conversations, and so just whatever you do, make sure that you protect the lives of the individuals who are with you and you. And, you can definitely ask and let them know that you would like to have legal counsel right away, and you have the right to remain silent. That's all.
We have some red cards we can hand out for we hand out red cards typically to individuals who are at risk, but you as a non-at-risk person can certainly have a red card, as we call it, which gives people kind of a quick how to respond. One of the things I do have to point out, though, with regard to that situation in Minneapolis, one of the things that we are training our volunteers and we're trying to talk to the community at risk about is if you're in a vehicle and an ICE agent approaches and says, get out, you have a very short window of time to respond to that order. And that's where we've run into some really bad situations where agents have broken the car windows and dragged the occupants out. We've seen this in our own town, but also with regard to even the incident in Minneapolis. The car within a very short interval is deemed a weapon by the agents. That's what they've been operating under. And so they are then immediately proceeding to very aggressive behavior. We've had them pull guns on occupants and, as I said, break windows and drag people out of the cars. So just understand, they will deem that car a weapon within a very short period of time. So if they order you out of it, we recommend that you get out of the car. I know that sounds scary, but that's the truth. You want to take the microphone?
I mean, what would you do if a police officer came and told you that?
Oh, yeah. So were you done talking?
Yeah, yes.
Mine are about identifications. This one, I had two of them. One was for all the dreamers out there that don't have a green card, they have a worker's permit.
Yep.
Is that sufficient as ID to be carrying around?
Yes, and they would have a documentation showing that they were approved for DACA, and when you talk about dreamers, and so they can carry that along with their work authorization documentation. Sometimes they'll just have receipt notices and things like that. But we have heard situations where young students were arrested and handcuffed because they didn't have their documents with them, and their parents had to then go get the documents. So work authorization card, if it exists, a copy of their initial DACA approval will also work too. Extensions of their current status will also work.
And so my other question, I hope this is still appropriate, but I have a 12-year-old daughter at home who's really quite worried, and with ICE showing up to schools, she's like, do I need to have my birth certificate with me? What ID do children or people under 18 that aren't working need? What kind of ID do they need to be bringing around, and what's the legal on that?
I mean, as I mentioned, the types of documentation, if you're a minor, and I get that. We don't know what can happen. If you want to give them a copy of their birth certificate, you can. If that makes them feel safe. I'm sorry? Well, they can't be deported if they're lawful permanent residents or U.S. citizens and here lawfully. And if they're minors, they do have to provide that. The reason we are saying to have that document on you is that you want to close off the questions right away. And if you can establish that you are a lawful permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, then it hopefully closes ends any questions that they may have.
Hi, I'm not an employer, so I don't know if I should even, I'm kind of wondering if my question is, I believe in the rule of law. I really do. And when you said you've been doing this for 30 years, I have a new hero. God bless you guys for the work you do. Really, it's so important. But I feel like we're not in Kansas anymore. And it's hard to hear about what we need to do to obey the law when we are repeatedly led by an I don't think this is opinion administration who is ignoring the law, the rule of law, trampling on the Constitution. I think it is really difficult for me, and I think for other people, I hope I'm not the only one. It's like, I just feel like when you were talking about don't harbor someone, that's what they did in Germany. It's like good citizens don't don't harbor anyone. Don't harbor these people. I come at it from a different angle, and I'm just wondering, are there,
I
and
don't
maybe
think
this is not for you to answer, and it's an unfair
No,
question.
no,
But it's just,
I don't think we are standing up here to say don't harbor. We're just defining what harbor is that the government has defined. As individuals, we need to do whatever we believe in and understand the consequences of it. We're just giving you what the definitions are. I don't think in any way we stated that you cannot assist your neighbor in the way that you find is appropriate. I mean, I am in a fortunate situation that I'm a lawyer, so I can help individuals. That's part of my job. That's part of my ethical obligation. We just want you to know what the definition is, because I think I've been asked that, and you know, I hope that you know, if they want to use that against people in terms of charging them for harboring, then it's up to us individually as to what we're willing to stand up for.
Some of the harboring conversation has been present with regard to churches that declared themselves sanctuary churches. So that really was the genesis for us at First UCC in town. We declared ourselves a sanctuary church, built a residence in the church, and were prepared to receive people and to protect them. And we really needed to understand a great deal about that phenomenon. That's why I asked the attorneys to speak to it. But again, we've also had employers in town that have asked the question, what if ICE comes to my place of business? Can I put my employees in a back room? Can I tell them to go home? Can I close my place of business? And I think that's what we're really concerned about.
Two quick questions. One, so if I understand your previous point, there's a Fourth Amendment, but if someone asked you to get out of a car and do whatever they said, you're obligated to do that. And do whatever they said. And it could be just a masked person with no ID or whatever. Is that correct?
I think that every individual will need to determine what they believe they need to do in order to protect themselves. Definitely in regards to an individual who's masked, you have the right, our Know Your Rights card. The Constitution still applies here. Number one, we have never said it doesn't apply. And we can rely on that. Understand the context you are in. You know, I come from a situation where I am a child of war. My instinct is going to be to protect myself, and so I can survive. You know, so it depends on what your experience is, what you're able to. I have told my husband, who is a foreign national, that, you know, he needs to carry his documents around. If he's told to do something and he's stopped by a law enforcement officer, he's going to follow those orders, because we have seen the consequences when that isn't done. And so in terms of your Fourth Amendment rights or your rights, it still applies. So if someone comes up to you that's masked and orders you to do something, if you don't believe they're law enforcement, you have the right to ask for identification. You have the right to ask them that. But I'm not going to say that.
Are they obligated to provide identification?
They should be. That's part of their job description here. But I haven't been in this situation, so I don't know that's being followed.
We want to make sure that you also understand that a lot of people in town have been, our volunteers are trained to respond when ICE is present, okay? So we have a very strict protocol about how to behave in those encounters. But there have been citizens who have been present who've been yelling at the agents, demanding identification and a warrant. And I can tell you that as long as those agents are on, quote, a public street or in a public place, they are not obligated at this point in time to display a warrant. So it's fruitless to be yelling at them, let me see your warrant, right? They likely do have one. It's likely an arrest warrant, but they're not going to show it to you. So yelling that at them is just provocative at this point, in our opinion. And we ask them always what agency they're with and if they have identification. they have declined in every instance to respond to that. So again, you have to make some choices about what you're going to demand at this particular point in time. I'm going to just say to you that our responsibility as volunteers doing ICE intervention work is to protect the detainee. So we're not there to tick off the agents and to accelerate the situation. We're there to keep an eye on that detainee, to see to it that they are not mistreated, and to follow where they are taken, and to notify the family, and to provide supportive services. So that's really an important role for us. We're not there to fight with ICE. It's really, they have all the cards right now. So let's just be really mindful about that behavior. It's very important.
Yeah, let me add 2 quick points and we'll take this question over here. I think one, and this overarches our entire conversation, there's a question of what does the law require you to do versus what risks you're willing to take and what ethically you feel you should do. And that's a personal decision. We as lawyers, we're here to tell you what the law is, what you should do in terms of following the law. But what you should do ethically is something that only you can determine. And I would take away from this conversation that in light of the political climate that we're in light of the surge of activity that we're seeing, carefully consider that as you go through this next month or so. The other point I have is that here in Northfield specifically, your police chief is here at this conversation. I think that goes a long way to showing that. I think that goes a long way to showing that the city is here and has your interests in mind during this federal surge of activity. And when it comes to stops of cars, you can ask him, it's a really complicated area of the law. Like, we spent like 4 weeks on it in law school, and I still couldn't tell you what's allowed and what's not allowed, what the standards are. It's really complicated, and it's a really quick scenario. If you have specific questions, he's probably your best bet to ask and can give you better advice than we probably ever could. I
would also just write down the letters AILA. It's the the Association of Immigration Lawyers, right? It's AILA. AILA. You can just, there's just one of several excellent websites that you can go to, and they have Know Your Rights documents for ICE at your home, ICE on the street, ICE at your workplace. They have them in English and in Spanish. I just commend you to just become a student of that information. You should just know it. Everyone should be aware of it. So it's impossible for us to really encompass all of that information for you. I also want to put in a pitch for the fact that our current police department has a written policy, number 413, that states explicitly the nature of their relationship with immigration. It's available. You can actually go online and Google it and read it yourself. But the current policy of our law enforcement department is that their job is public safety and traffic control, and that they are not in a contractual agreement to assist ICE in the enforcement of federal law. That's a little quick touch of it. I don't want to go into the entire policy on it, but some jurisdictions do have a policy to cooperate, one of which is Dakota County Sheriff, which is just North Avenue North. They do have a 287G contract with ICE for enforcement. We do not have it with our Northfield Police, and we don't have it with our Rice County Sheriff's Office.
Thanks, Gina. I think we have time for maybe one more, and then this goes for everybody. Juan and I are here to help. Our contact information is on this slide, our emails. You can always contact Gina as well to get a hold of us after the fact. But I know you've been waiting a long time, so go ahead.
A number of us are here from Northfield Rotary, and Rotary sponsors a number of international exchange students. They have identification that Rotary has approved that has their immigration status on the form. Two-part question. One, would you also recommend that they carry a copy of their passport? And secondly, is there any way that you can help us have adolescents understand the importance of carrying that identification with them?
Yeah.
No, good questions. In terms of, so is this a Rotary specific form, or are you instructing forms?
Yeah, usually if they're here on the Rotary, it's probably a J status that they're in. And so they will have a DS 2019 form, which talks about what program they're under. Their I-94 record will have duration of status, which means they can be here as long as the program that they're in is still valid, which is based on that DS 2019. So really a copy of their, if they have a driver's license, anything to show their identity, their I-94 record, which can be printed off online at cbp.gov, and also the DS 2019, which is shows that the Rotary is their sponsor to be here for their program.
So before we lose any more of you or say thank you to our speakers, I just want to tell you that the City of Northfield has assured me that they will, after this, prepare a link on their website for you to access the recording of this program, as well as to provide you with access to the PowerPoints and to the handouts. So we'll make sure that we'll ask Rotary if they're willing to, and the Chamber if they're willing to, for example, and other networks to communicate that link to you so that you have access to it. That's really the only way that we can do it, so stay tuned. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. Stay safe out there. Bless you for being here and care for your neighbor.
Yeah.
Let's say thank you.
Thank you. Gina. Jeremy and I are in our offices day to day dealing with questions from foreign nationals, individuals who are really concerned and scared. And I have to tell you, I love being here. Thank you for the opportunity to know that there is community here to support individuals who are our clients, who are foreign national students. Thank you so much. It's so important for them to feel that in this time that we're in. So thank you for having us here.
Should they, in light of the information gathering that the current administration is doing, should those be kept in their file versus in the I-9 file?
The E-Verify documents are required to be